Hi, everybody. It is I, Martha Beck. Who is Martha Beck? It is I. I am back from Africa. Sorry I missed a couple of broadcasts. I was in the air over the North Pole. I was like Santa Claus. So I hope you guys have not forgotten about the gathering room and gathering in it with me. And I am back here in California. And there are 4 of you. Yay! We're gathered. And today we're going to talk about activism. Hello, everyone. I'm seeing faces come up. You can always send us a howdy on the comments if you want to type it in. Adrian from Sydney, all the way from Sydney. My goodness, it must be very early in Sydney. Thank you for joining us, Adrian and Kelly and River. Hi, River. And Wendy and Linda and Angie and all the everybody's from everywhere. Look at you. You remembered. I can't even believe it. I will say what? Hi from Dubai. Hi, Kathleen. Hi, Kelly from Dubai. Flew into your city, out of your city. So good to be here with you. Now we have over 100 viewers. So I think that's my, hi from Brooklyn, Esther. I am going to start when I have over 100 people. So we have over 100 people. So I wanted to talk to you today about activism and your personal mission, because both of those things have been very much on my mind lately. I came into the country having been gone during the beginning of the border children issue. And I was, of course, overwhelmed with sorrow, with outrage. And some of you might disagree with me, but this is just how I felt. To me, it's like, send us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. When did we start doing this? My ancestors were immigrants, so were almost everybody's, except for the people who were flat out killed. So I was very struck by the need for activism. And I thought, oh, I've been out of the country. I haven't been doing anything. And then I thought, wait, I've just spent 3 weeks raising money to restore ecosystems in Africa, to educate local people, especially girls and women, to help prevent AIDS, to do all these things. Like, I've been activating. The thing is that right now, with so many avenues of information, we get a front row seat to atrocities and horrors that are happening all over the globe. And it's very, very compelling to see that kind of suffering, and it makes us want to do something active. At the same time, because there's so much of it, it can be quite overwhelming. I mean, I get overwhelmed just trying to deal with one little issue. Like when I used to go to the heroin addict clinic in Phoenix, I would be overwhelmed just with the problems of the 5 people in the methadone clinic where I was coaching. So how do you do activism right in this age of knowing everything? We're still just, our ability to take information in has vastly increased. Our ability to roll up our sleeves and do something for others is still kind of itty bitty. So I like to go back to one time when I was very distraught over the fate of sea lions in California. Global temperatures are rising. The mother sea lions had to go far away from their babies to get food because of the change in the ocean climate. And the babies were starving by their thousands on the beaches of California. And I just wasn't coping. And I was talking to Byron Katie that day, and I told her about the seal pups. And I said, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, honey, why don't we start with the only little seal pup we have right here, and that's you. Which was so compassionate. And she wasn't saying, don't go out and help the seals. She was saying, once you help the part of you that is identified with the suffering, once you've healed that part, then that part of you will actually give you the information to go out and know what you can touch in the world of matter around us. So the first thing is to see the world as your insides. So the very first thing to do with the border children is to see where have you been separating your inner child or your inner shards of children from the loving, compassionate care of your higher self. Where can you reunite yourself with the broken child inside you? In terms of the ecosystems and the oceans. I had a friend, I've talked about her before, I think, who's passionate about ocean conservation, but she also isn't very careful of her own body. Sometimes, well, she probably is now, but one time we were talking about this, and she had been keeping herself awake artificially to get work done by drinking lots of coffee and caffeine, and it was hurting her body. Her adrenals were frying. She was basically polluting the ocean of the inside of her body. I talked to a farmer once who was obsessive about healing the green things of the world. And we did a walk through his own body. And I said, walk through your body the way you'd walk through a farm or a forest that you were trying to nurture. And he just started sobbing. And he said, it's so dry. I never take care of it. I never take care of the inside. So I know that might sound selfish. And the first thing we want to do with activism is to rush out and help. But believe me, one of my fields in my doctoral work way back when was to look at all the development and NGO attempts to heal the third world after World War II. And it's the most depressing thing you've ever read in your life. I read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of monograms, hundreds of thousands of pages about efforts to do good that had gone completely sideways. So I learned a lot from that, and I learned to get balanced in myself and then to feel my way forward with my integrity. What's the right step to take? What's the right step to take? So for example, in Africa, I funnel all the funds that I make there into an organization called the Good Work Foundation, which is an NGO, but I know the person who runs it, and it's a few people, although it's grown to be a pretty huge educational sort of almost a diaspora in Africa. They're starting to go, these education centers are starting to go out from the center, but the center is really solid and goes right to the people, and it doesn't go through layers of bureaucracy and so on. So this is what I want us to be able to do when we look at the news these days. First, you go in and you find, where are you most upset? You find the part of yourself that is reflecting what is most upsetting to you. If there are people you think are evildoers who are making bad policies, where are you making bad policies for yourself? If there are beings or people who are in need, if they're hungry, if they're alone, if they're homeless, what part of you hungers without being fed? What part of you doesn't have a home in your own heart, in your own life, right? Take care of that. And then what you feel is not the anxiety of rushing to help something, anything. You feel the compassion of consciousness moving through you and guiding you. And then you take action in a way that's most powerful for you. So in my case, people told me I should be, as soon as my son was born, they said, you should be an activist for Down syndrome and march on the steps of the Capitol, the state capitol, holding signs about education for people with intellectual disabilities. I just couldn't get out there with the sign. I had 3 toddlers, I had fibromyalgia. I couldn't carry a sign. So what I did was I wrote Expecting Adam. And then people said, yay, you'll write many books about Down syndrome. Nope. It just, what I know to do has changed over time, but I've always tried to put my own energy in a place where it can do the most good and let the spiritual side of me and not the mental side of me make those calls, because it's too complex for the mind. The mind just isn't big enough, but the spirit is big enough to determine exactly the right way for us to take action. And then those series of actions add up to our personal mission, our purpose for being here, our mission in life. So I want to take some questions now. Oh, you can't.
There aren't any.
Oh, there aren't any questions yet. Okay, so you can put some questions in now if you want. I didn't know if maybe you couldn't hear me. I was very scared there for a minute. So let's all do a little exercise here. Take a deep breath, let it out, and pinpoint an issue that you know is happening in the world that hurts your heart. And it might be that you feel outrage about something, or it might be that you feel despair about something, or it might be that you are panicked, fearful about something. So look for those negative emotions, sad, mad, and scared. If I look in myself right now, the whole border issue is really big for me. So then I seek for the part of myself that feels so sad. And I say, okay, well, how old are you? 7, 6, 7. Okay. What do you need today? I have to let my 7-year-old self answer this. Okay. So when I was a kid, I drew and painted a lot. That was what I did. And what my 7-year-old self just said was make a picture. And then my grown-up mind says, you can make a picture, put it on social media, and maybe raise awareness with that. And then immediately my mind jumps to, oh, Glennon Doyle is doing this amazing fundraising to reunite the families at the border. I'm going to give some money to her. So those are the things that are coming up into my mind as I go in, look for the pain, look for the cure, and then creativity flows through that. And I have a series of ideas. I'll act on those, and it's kind of like a treasure hunt. You act on the things you're told to do, and then you get another set of instructions. You get the next step. So Marcia Stoltz is saying racism upsets me. So what you do is you look for isms in yourself. Where are you hating on yourself for the way you look? The way you don't match the standard of what's considered ideal in our culture, even if you happen to be of, the dominant race. There are still things about the way you look and the way you show up in the world, the way your social class has developed, that you may yourself hate. You may hate yourself for the way you look, for the class that you live in, for the way your family dresses or whatever it is. You have to find a way to apologize to yourself for the isms, for the cruelties. So you want to stand up inside yourself and say, I am sorry for the times that I have attacked you for looking wrong in my eyes. That is not okay. I am made at the core of unconditional love. And so my effort today will be to unconditionally accept the way I show up and the way I look. So Camilla says the plastic in the ocean. How can we make the right countries cooperate? How can we make people stop trashing nature? Yeah, I was going over this right before the broadcast. I had a bottle of water that I bought at Starbucks, and it was Ethos water, and it gets clean water. Every time you buy a bottle of it, it helps get clean water to children, but the bottle is plastic. So it's going to add to the plastic load in the oceans. So the first thing is, okay, where am I not cooperating with myself in keeping trash out of myself? So what comes up for me is making sure that I put the right things in my body, making sure that I eat the way I know to eat and get a lot of clean water myself. Then the next thing that occurs to me is recycle the damn plastic bottle. And then it occurs to me to go join with other people who are interested in healing the plastic gyre in the ocean, see if I want to get involved. Like there may be several. And what will happen is there's that kind of magnetism. We talk about, or at least the New Age people talk about magnetizing things toward us. In the same way, we are magnetized toward the right actions for us. So the important thing is to remember the instructions always come now. You're not going to get a list of instructions for what to do for the rest of your life. You're going to get a feeling of magnetism toward one place you can help or another. So like Glennon Doyle's came up for me because I know her, I feel her energy, I like it. That felt magnetic to me. And then you start banding together with others, just like we're doing here, And then you will learn step by step by step which things you can do actually to clean up the plastic. You might go out there on a boat and do it, or you might be, yes, by the way, Glennon Doyle is the Together Rising person. You may be moved to go out and gather plastic off the road in your community, or you may decide never to use plastic again. There are all these different things that you might do, and none of them is perfectly right, and none of them is perfectly wrong. So Liliana says, what would you suggest if you feel flooded with emotions? Yes. I personally feel scared, powerless, and hopeless overall. I sincerely don't know where to begin. Boy, do I ever hear that. That is exactly how I've felt since I remember watching Mutual of Omaha when I was like 4 at my grandmother's house, and they would always talk about habitat destruction, and I would just cry inconsolably because there was nothing I could do. But it so happened that I grew up and I am able to do something. The important thing is just remember, start with self. So Liliana, if you look in and you feel flooded with pain, the first thing to do is any kind of self-care and self-compassion at all. It's great to start with a loving kindness meditation. Just simply offer yourself good wishes. May you be well. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. And just go through your whole day repeating that and bringing your attention back to the loving kindness every single time you fall into fear. So then once you get a sort of, this actually changes your brain wiring so that you have compassion flowing toward the self. Then you actually address the part of you that feels hopeless and scared. You take a walk outside, you breathe deeply, you go into nature, you get a hug from a beloved person, you take a nap. You start to heal the self, because taking action from a place of wounding and desperation creates more wounding and desperation. We broadcast into the world the energy that we hold. So coming from a healed, gentle place makes the world more healed and gentle. So if you can't feel that way, your attention should always go to yourself. And that's just it's a really easy, clear thing to do in a world that is not easy and not clear. So Liliana, I hope you take good care of yourself today. So Tracy says, how can I stop feeling outraged by bigotry? One thing you can do, this is pretty radical, is to realize that you yourself have experienced bigotry from the inside. When I was at the Byron Katie School, I'm gonna sorry if this is a spoiler alert for anybody who's planning to go, but at one point, Katie had a woman who'd written a worksheet that was bigoted. She said, write down your most bigoted thoughts. So the woman, very honestly, wrote about how she did not like Jewish people, and it was just this anti-Semitic rant. And so Katie had the woman stand up and turn to face the group of maybe 300 people, and she said, would all the Jews in the audience please stand up? So about 25 people stood up. And this woman stood there, and Katie had her read all her bigoted statements right into the faces of the people she was accusing. But then she took another step, which was pure genius. So this woman said, I will never forget it. She said, I think Jews are clannish and exclusionary. And Katie said to the Jews in the audience, how many of you have ever experienced being clannish and exclusionary? And every single one of them raised their hands. They could all think of times when they'd excluded other people. The woman said, I think the Jews are obsessed with money. Stereotype. Katie said, how many of you out there have felt like you've been obsessed with money at some times in your life? Like everybody else in the world, all the Jewish people in the audience raised their hands. And what happened as they accepted that they could find it in themselves, the outrage and the resistance at this woman began to come down. And as it did, she couldn't hold her bigotry. So this is a really counterintuitive way to go at it, to find it in yourself. Even things you're angry at, find the enemy in yourself, acknowledge, oh, I've done that too. I have pushed people away from me. I have been callous. I've worn the wrong coat, whatever it is. And say, all right, from there, I can start to see the people, the bigots as human, because I'm being bigoted against bigots if I can't do that. So the moment I say no bigots here, I'm being a bigot. It's this thing where if we can find everything in ourselves, we can soften. And I got to tell you something, the world is a mirror. Once they're looking you right in the eye and you've owned all your own bigotry and you've accepted yourself completely, they can't hold as strong a contradictory energy. So the anger with which we go at each other in the public forums is actually making things considerably worse. You know, the whole screaming polemics on television, the screaming polemics online. War creates war. Resistance begets resistance. And if you can come in with a message of love, it starts to melt that. And the only way to do that is to start by loving yourself. So Carol says, howdy, Carol. I struggle when I see violence in activism. People shouting outside a bus that holds scared and probably traumatized children. It hurts them. Absolutely. You're so right, Carol. That's what I was just saying. The irony of becoming the thing we hate, becoming the thing we resist. And this is not rare. It doesn't happen sometimes. It's inevitable. And this is why I think Jesus said, turn the other cheek, not to be weak and to be beaten, but to not present a mirror to violence that shows another violent face. You turn, and my way of turning the other cheek is turn inward, find where you're yelling at yourself, accept both the part of yourself that's being yelled at and the part that does the yelling. So love your inner critic. Look into why you scream at yourself and say, oh, that's coming out of pain and trauma as well. Then you become a center of calm. And you guys, I've been around people who live like this, and there is literally a circle of calm that projects tangibly, physically around them because they've sat with their own contradictions and they've looked at all the issues in themselves that we are afraid to look at in the world, that we're outraged by in the world. And by loving that, they become a center of peace. And it's almost like an umbilical cord for compassion. They become these central nodes that can nourish the people around them. And then it ripples outward. And with social media, again, we get a lot of information in, but if we can become centers of peace and compassion, we also send a ripple out. And it's more powerful than you might think. Yeah. Oh, Sarah says, how can I release my expectations of others? I don't know how. I don't think I can. But when my expectations are flouted, when I don't get what I expect, I can address my own pain. I remember once I was so angry at the government for not doing something that I had really thought, something good I thought would happen. I was so angry and I wrote down, they should stop being so reactive. They should be more accepting, blah, blah, blah. And then I had to turn around to myself. Oh, and that was it. They shouldn't be afraid to take positive action because their own interests might be damaged. And I was like, oh, I'm afraid of them. So what I got to do when I see something that outrages me, see something that frightens me, go in and realize I'm angry at them for being angry. I'm afraid of them because they're afraid. So I can learn from the lessons that I am trying to teach others. And if I don't do that, I'm an umbilical cord of hypocrisy rather than peace. So I know this is monotonous, this turn toward yourself, but it really, really is weirdly the way to make an impact outward in the world, to become that center of peace within yourself. You look at somebody like Aung San Suu Kyi, who did a lot of activism in Myanmar after her father, who was prime minister, was killed. She won a Nobel Peace Prize, and she didn't, as far as I know, she didn't do a lot of heavy duty organizing and political campaigning and running armies. She lived a life of asceticism and compassion. And there's a really powerful story that's been validated by many witnesses where a whole platoon of soldiers had their guns trained on her. And she was with a few other people who were with her. And she had them stand aside. And she walked up to the soldiers. And some say they were told to fire on her and did not. Some say they were never told to fire. But one way or the other, what she did was she walked along the front row of these guns pointed at her. If you've ever had a loaded gun pointed at you, one gun, it's freaking terrifying. These were hundreds, and she walked along the lines of guns and she touched them with her fingers. And as she did, the soldiers dropped their guns. And it was because she had done the inner work. And so she had become that force of peace. You guys have no idea how powerful this is. It's not as visible as other things. That doesn't mean it isn't powerful. So Fatima says, if there's no enemy on the inside, the enemy on the outside can't attack you. Wow. African proverb. I did not know that. But if you haven't read Left to Tell by Immaculée Ilikabiza, she was a Tutsi who escaped the Hutu massacre in Rwanda. And she spent 3 months hiding in a bathroom and got rid of all her fear and all her anger. And when she ended up outside, surrounded by Hutus who were screaming that they were going to murder her, she just stood there without fear and without anger. And they couldn't come in. They literally made a circle of threats, but they couldn't approach her physically. So it's true. A lot of the good peoples, like the Jesus and the Gandhi and the Martin Luther King, didn't end up dying all that well, or did they? Because while they lived, they sent that ripple of peace out so that every one of us knows their names. Every one of us, every life has been touched by that. And they did it at such a high level that they became martyrs. But there are a lot of other people, like the Buddhas, who didn't, who lived long, happy lives spreading that peace. And there are a lot of people still out there doing it. So I used to be afraid I'd be assassinated if I became too charitable because I grew up hearing about the crucifixion. I'm not that important. So Jerica says, what does self-care really mean? I get my nails done, for example, but I feel the same overall, just with nicer nails. Yeah, the first thing is the internal dialogue, the internal narrative in the head. This is where cruelty lives. This is where cultural absolutes live. This is where all the bigotry comes from, is the mind unquestioned by the heart, which is why in Asia they say the mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. So you put your heart in charge and you listen for viciousness in your own mind. Anything that says you've got to keep working, you don't get to be tired, you didn't do that well enough, you don't look right. All the things we say to the people we're bigoted against, you don't belong here, you're not good enough. All of that stuff has to calm down. And you do it by loving the part that's being criticized, but not by making it a victim. Because you also love the part that is doing the criticizing, and you feel the fear that's coming, that is at the basis of all that. And you love them both. And as you love them both, I see where you're coming from, inner critic. I see where you're coming from, inner victim. But I'm going to watch you from a place that is just compassion. What happens is it literally changes your brain. And your brain is more, it moves activity of the brain into the back part of the brain, which is where the brain activates when we fall in love, when we lose the sense of being a separate self and we realize we can connect with others. Both falling in love, literal physical connection, and the consciousness that feels literally connected at a metaphysical level with all things. That's why the ripple of peace goes out. So that's where it starts, in the mind. And then, again, once you've healed the bigot inside you, once you've healed the lost child inside you, you say, what can I do to make you feel a little better? So you're not a victim and you're not a bigot. What would heal you a bit? Could I sit down with a book by my favorite author and a really nice cup of tea and soak my mind in something beautiful, something inspiring, something poetic? Could I go for a walk outside? Again, I'm going to mention the hug. Could I sit with my dog and comfort the one little pup I've got on my lap? And then comfort the one little pup I've got in my heart. That is the only way I know how to do activism, but it's been enough for my whole life so far, and I think it's going to be a whole life forevermore. And from that 4-year-old who was weeping inconsolably watching how the African animals are all losing their habitat, I grew up to be a 55-year-old woman who's helping Americans bring money into Africa to create habitat for those very same animals. and, other little things that I've done. But I just want to keep doing that. I want that to be what my life is about. And that feels like purpose to me. So thank you for gathering with me. I love you guys. It is so good to be here. Oh, Christina wants to know what's the name of the Tutsi Hutu book. It's Left to Tell. It's an amazing book. I highly recommend it. So until next week, much love, much peace, much activism, and much rest. Mwah! Love you guys.